Marla Runyan is a two-time U.S. Olympian and Paralympian in track and field. At the age of 9, she was diagnosed with Stargardt's disease that has caused her to lose her vision over the course of her life. She has competed in numerous races, and she is the first U.S. Legally blind person to qualify and compete in the Olympic Games. She has also competed against fully sighted individuals. She has won numerous gold medals, and she holds a master's degree in special education. She's a sports equity advocate and does some work with accessibility. We are thrilled and honored to have Marla with us today. You were diagnosed with Stargardt's disease at the age of 9. Can you tell us about how your diagnosis came about and how your vision has degenerated, has become, or is lost, has been, progressed in terms of vision loss over the years?
Sure. So I had normal vision all the way up, and through age 9. So really the first time I started to realize that there was something going on was first day of school in the 4th grade.
Okay.
And I remember it very well because, first day of school, you always remember those days. And my teacher started to write on the chalkboard. This is back in the 1970s, so I'm dating myself. And I couldn't see what she was writing. I looked up and it didn't look like words. I couldn't really make out any words on the board. And I immediately thought, well, what's wrong with her chalk? So it never occurred to me that there was something happening or something wrong with my eyes. So from that day forward, my teacher talked to my parents, and the solution seemed, really obvious and simple, that I just needed glasses. And so from there, we went to the local optometrist who couldn't diagnose the problem or correct my vision. So he referred us out into Los Angeles. I grew up in California, so we went out to Los Angeles. And really the process took over a year because I was misdiagnosed twice, and then finally saw a retina specialist. And that's when I was my parents and I were told that I had Stargardt's. So it was, I'm summarizing it because it's a very long story, but at that time, so by age 9, age 10, my vision had gone to 2200. And so the way I explain that is most people are familiar with the standard Snellen eye chart. When they go to the eye doctor, they'll see a chart at the end of the hallway or into the room, and it has like the big E at the top. So if all you see is the big E, then that is a visual acuity of 2200. And if that's all you can see, and that's your best correctable visual acuity, then that's actually the level of what's determined as legal blindness. And there's also another correct criteria if you had limited field. In my case, it was visual acuity. So by the time I was finally diagnosed, I was already at 2200. And then through the next, 5 to 10 years, I would slip to 2300. And then into my adult life, even slipping further to 2400, and somewhere between 2400 and 2600 today. So a lot of progression initially when I was a child, and then very slow progression over the next several years.
Okay. And so I know with Stargardt's that you tend to lose primarily your central vision, and you still have your peripheral vision intact. So is that how you would describe your vision in simple terms?
Definitely, yes. So the hardest thing to do is look straight ahead because there's nothing there. So it's like, even doing this interview, my tendency is to do this so that I can see better in my top peripheral field. and to face and look forward at people is so difficult because I have to literally make you disappear and put you in a blind spot where there's no vision in order to make you feel that I'm looking at you. So it's it's kind of ironic. But you are correct that my side vision and lower field and top and my upper visual field remain intact. Now, we don't have any acuity in our peripheral field. I don't know if a lot of people realize that, but all of our acuity is in our central vision. So even though I have the edges of my vision, I'm not seeing details or able to see print, like reading print or text, recognizing people or faces, things like that. I see more grander scale things. So I'll see more of the entirety of something as opposed to any of the details. Right. So it's the best way I can describe it.
That's a perfect way to describe it. So prior to your diagnosis, did you have other goals and aspirations, or did you, like from a young age, know that you wanted to be a professional athlete?
I actually had no idea that I was going to be a professional. I didn't even know that was a thing. I did not even know that was a thing. I remember like high school years, I was for a while, at one point I was really into music. I used to play violin when I was much younger. And then I thought that, I was going to be a musician. And then I, in high school, got this is going to be somewhat similar to your experience, but I got interested in education of the deaf, and which is, I know sounds ironic since I'm visually impaired, but I started to teach myself some sign language, some American Sign Language, and that ended up becoming my major in college. And so my original plan was that I was going to be a teacher for deaf-blind children. Okay. It was a very specialized program that I had applied to. So I had kind of sorted out by high school or, around that time that I was going to be a teacher. And I even, to connect to your story a bit, is that I was really interested in speech language pathology as well. So, so that was really a focus in my academics. And then but I was the whole time always doing a sport. So I was running track for my university, and just figured I would run track. And then as soon as my eligibility was done, I'd done my 4 years, I would just go back and go and, focus on graduate school and beyond. And then, it just didn't turn out that way. It was really a plan B, where I started to have some success as an athlete, and just that little bit of success just kept motivating me to want to continue. And by the time I finished graduate school, I had a new goal, and that was I wanted to see if I could qualify for the U.S. Olympic trials, and that was in 1996. And the Olympic trials is our national championships in track and field. It's how we pick our Olympic team. And you have to qualify just to go to the trials. So my goal at that time was to go to the trials. And I figured that's probably as far as I'm going to get. I'm going to go to the trials, do the best I can, and then I'll be done. And then I'll be done with this, with track, and go back to start teaching. But like I said, it was just every now and then a little bit of success would happen, and it would be like, I have to try, I have to stick with this. I got to try again in 4 years. And that's exactly what happened. So it really wasn't the plan from the beginning. It's a plan that just evolved over time. So.
And it's amazing. So specifically with running and then your field events, what has running brought to you in terms of physically, mentally? This was your plan C or whatever, which is great. But what made you feel that being an athlete?
That's an excellent question. I feel as though I just feel like it's who I was born to be. I was like, as a child, I was in gymnastics, or I loved to swim, or I played soccer, or I would even build, like, when I was really little, I would build like fitness circuits in my backyard where I would do a series of exercises and then I would run, and then I just loved physical challenge. Like, I wanted, how fast can I do this? You know, how many can I do? How many sit-ups can I do? How many, it was that kind of, I was that kind of a kid, and that never really left me. I was always sort of intrigued and fascinated by how can I push myself physically to be the best athlete I could be. And track is, for anyone who's run track knows exactly what that feeling is like, because pushing yourself through the 400 meters or the 800 meters, or a series of intervals, or in my case, I made the Olympic team in the 1500 meters, and then my second Olympic team in the 5000. And to me, it's like, I think of it is not just a sport. To me, it's like an art, because you train so much for this one moment in time to really put out a performance that you can't just do any day of the week. And I think of like training for the national championships or the Olympic trials, and all of the work that goes into preparing for that one race, which is 10 months of work, 11 months of work, plus the previous years of buildup. As you, each year and each season, you're building upon your base, and you're getting stronger and hopefully faster. It's all building for this moment in time. And to me, that moment in time is very unique. It's crafted. And so that's why I think of it as something of an art, as an art form. And when you can put together your perfect race, which doesn't happen very often, and you're lucky if you get one in your whole career, there's just there's no greater reward of that. It's like this feeling of such empowerment and independence, and all of it, the challenge of racing and the challenge of running, and it's in and of itself is its own reward when you can push through that and achieve something that you've never achieved before. That's such a motivator. It's so rewarding. And that was something I just fed off of. I loved that as an athlete, because sometimes in track, I've lost way more races than I've won. You don't always win. And it's not always about winning. It's about finding your personal best, or reaching your personal best and reaching that potential. Because really winning and losing is about who's in the race. and it's relative, right? But when you are training and racing to achieve your personal best, it's about bringing out the best in yourself. Absolutely. And that's really to me, that's what the reward was. No offense, to be honest, love to win. There's nothing wrong with winning, but it's not the end all be all of why we do the sport. It's all of it put together. It's the challenge of it. It's the training. It's the preparation. It's the races, and it's that compilation over time that really kind of created an entire career. When I look back at my professional running career, which was about 8 years of running, the moments that really stand out are ones that I never expected would stand out, that were just special. And even training sessions and times of going on long runs with friends and local runners that I knew and trained with, those were really special times. And you don't necessarily realize that in the moment that you're doing it, but it's something you'll always remember.
Yeah, for sure. I would remember them too. So you are the first U.S. legally blind Paralympic athlete who's also competed and qualified for the Olympic Games. I know we spoke a little bit about how, what being an athlete means to you, but when, knowing this, in your mind, like what type of like big achievement is this? Because in everyone else's mind, it's a huge achievement.
I did not plan to be the first anything. It's very simple. I was simply an athlete trying to reach her potential, and figuring out in a very basic level, how fast can I run? It's that simple. It wasn't like I wanted to be the first of something and put my name in the newspaper. I didn't care about those things. I wouldn't say I didn't care. That wasn't the motivator. The motivator was still about achieving my potential as an athlete that's all that really mattered. Everything that came as sort of incidental to that, which most of it was so unexpected, I didn't even realize that people were paying attention to me, let alone being the first of something, you know. It was just that I had my whole life. First of all, I feel extremely fortunate because I had parents who didn't hold me back or limit my experiences and were fully supportive of me pursuing a running career when they didn't have to be, but they were. So I'm very, very thankful for their support through my life, through my running career and my entire life. But I also had very fortunate to have had some really great coaching in my professional career. I had different coaches, but all of those coaches gave me something very unique. They taught me something very unique. And I think it was bringing all those pieces together that created me the athlete that I became. So I'll just come back to your question, I guess, in that I remember, I'll go back to the Olympic trials 2000. So the Olympic trials, like I said, that's where we choose our Olympic team. It's pretty straightforward. You have to be first, second, or third in your event to be on the team. If you're fourth, you don't go. If you're the world record holder and you finish fourth at the trials, you don't make the team. It is not a subjective process. It's very objective. It's either perform on that day or you don't go. The other requirement to make an Olympic team in track and field is that you have to have run the Olympic standard, which is a time standard. And you have usually there's a window of time to do that. And you need to have done that prior to the Olympic trials. You don't want to try to be chasing the standard and try to get in the top 3 in the same race. The best situation is to have the time standard achieved before you get to the trials, which was true in my case in 2000. So it was racing for position. It was racing for our top 3. And in that particular race in that year, I was running for third. There were 2 women much, much faster than I was. And there were several women about the same as I was. We were very close in our personal best times and in our racing, racing level. So it was really those of us in that position racing for that third spot. But I remember coming off the 1500 meters is often referred to as the metric mile. It's just shy of a mile. It's 3 3/4 laps. So coming down the final straightaway in those Olympic trials, the first 2, like I mentioned, the first 2 athletes the first 2 women were ahead of me, and I actually couldn't see them at that point because we haven't talked about that yet. But on the track, when people get too far away from me, I can't see them anymore. So I don't always know what position I'm in a race if it gets spread out. But when I came down that final straightaway, I thought I was in third. I was like, everything I had, I was up on my toes. I was sprinting as hard as I could to the finish line. And I crossed the finish line. And you have to remember, it's a stadium and there's 33,000 people there and it's on television and there's a big jumbotron with all the results, of first, second, third, fourth, fifth, and so on. I couldn't see any of that. I couldn't see the results. And so the entire crowd, everybody knew who the top 3 were. Everybody knew I had to make the Olympic team except me. I didn't actually know for sure at that moment. And as I've done on many occasions in my life, I tried to fake it and pretend like, okay, everything's cool. Everything's fine, and I'm like catching my breath and my hands on my hips kind of thing. And I'm like, I can't stand this anymore. And a track and field official, and he was standing on the side of the track. And I said, what place did I get? He must have thought I was absolutely crazy. And I can't remember it exactly, but part of me thinks that he didn't speak to me. He held up 3 fingers, which is even more ironic because I wouldn't be able to see the 3 fingers, but he held them up really, really close to my face, like really close to my eyes. And it was at that moment that I was like, I realized what I had achieved. And that was a 12-year dream. I mean, I had started dreaming of maybe someday, hopefully in some far-fetched, dream of making an Olympic team as far back as 1988. So for 12 years, I carried that dream. And that was the moment I realized that it had come true. And, I didn't, again, I was not thinking of anything else other than, I just can't believe this. And then I think I felt just a tremendous sense of gratitude in that moment, because it was a realization too that I did not get there by myself, that there were just so many people in my life, chiropractors, and mentioned my parents, my now husband, who was, we were together, but we weren't married yet. So it's like, there were just really significant people throughout my life who were there to support me in this pursuit of this goal. And I felt this tremendous gratitude for that at that time.
It's amazing. So when competing, what strategies did you use to navigate the course, the jumps, and so forth?
Really good question. So if you don't mind, why don't we just focus on on running? We'll focus on running specifically, since I kind of left the field events when I became a professional athlete. I was really just running by then.
Okay.
So I'll tell you really simply. So everybody knows that track is 400 meters. It's an oval track, oval shape. I can see the lanes, and I can see the ground by my feet. So I don't run with a guide on the track. You always run counterclockwise. The way track is run, you always run counterclockwise. So if somebody is running clockwise, they do not know the sport of track and field. You always run counterclockwise. The start and finish is at the end of the straightaway going into a turn. So kind of these are very standardized aspects of a track. So it doesn't matter what track I'm on, whether I'm on a track at Eugene, Oregon at Hayward Field, or I'm on a high school track, or I'm on at the Olympic Stadium. But they're all the same, generally speaking, in that they're the same distance. Some tracks might have six, 7 lanes. Some might have 9 lanes, but it depends. Standard tracks have 8 lanes. So, but where things happen on a track, your position on the track is pretty standard. So going into a turn, I'm 200 meters to the finish, right? So you have to also remember that the number of track intervals that I have run in my lifetime has got to be somewhere in the thousands, or at least it sure seems like the number of times I've run repeat 400s, repeat 200s, or you do sets of intervals like 800s, and then you do like 2, 4, 8 mile and come back down. So those are interval sessions, right? So you get, as a track athlete, it becomes so not, I want to say robotic, but it becomes so familiar, because it's like anybody training for their art, right? Anybody practicing their sport or training, you just get to a place where you know how you feel when you head into the 200 with 200 to go. You know when I'm on a track, I cannot see lap counters. I cannot see the clocks. So in large competitions, in national and international competitions, they usually have at least 2 clocks. They're very, very large, like 4 feet or so at least, if not larger. You'll see them at the 200 meter mark, which is heading into the final turn, and you'll see them at the start finish line. And those clocks, as big as they are, I really can't see them when I'm moving. The only way I'd be able to see what's on the clock would be as if I walked right up to it, got really, really close, and was standing perfectly still. So a lot of athletes, part of racing, especially middle distance and distance, is knowing your pace, and that clock is what's telling you your pace. And so not being able to access that in a race, especially in an international competition, I have to come up with other strategies. There's just no other way around it. So I would just say that, like, if it was usually if I was racing in the United States, my coach would be strategically placed somewhere on the outside of the track. They can't be on the infield, but like somewhere in the periphery, and they can call out my splits. So I would hear somebody yell my time split as I came through 400, 800 meters in the 1500 or something like that. But that's not something you can count on as you move into larger competitions, because there's no way I can have anybody that accessing, that close down in the stadium. I can't, it's just not going to be that's not a solution when you get to something like the Olympic Games. So in that situation, and in most cases, when I would race internationally, I'm really racing for position, because if you go to championship races, it's always about getting through the rounds. There's a prelim, a semi, and a final. You got to be like top 5 or top 3 or whatever round you're in to move on to the next round. So in those races, time is, I don't want to say irrelevant, but it's less relevant, because you are racing and designing your racing strategy around what everyone else is doing. And so the strategy in those races is about trying to keep myself as aware of what's happening and where my position is in relation to everyone else. So that's really how I would, that's all I could count on in those races. I will tell you a funny story though. In the United States, when the commentation, there's usually a commentator who does like the lane, announces the athletes when, as you start the race and so on, and who will commentate to the crowd, right? There's somebody up very loud with a microphone and a speaker. So the crowd is hearing, and they usually say the athlete's names by their last name. So I'm Runyan, they don't say Marla, they say Runyan, second or third. And so when I would race in the United States in that kind of a situation, I would get my splits. I even remember at the US Nationals in 2001, I was getting my splits from the announcer commentating the race to the spectators. Everybody else could see the clocks, not me. So I was leading that race. I ended up winning that race actually, but and took the lead in that race. And so I was kind of by myself and didn't have anything to key off of. And I would hear the announcer say my name, and then he would read off what my 400 meter split was. And I was running the 5,000 that year. So that's true story. So I would, if there was a better answer to your question about like other strategies, there's just certain things that you just know going in. It's like, I just have to go into an event as my number one, I think, strategy in life has always been to prepare as best I can, like over prepare, pre-prepare. And as you know as well, the other strategy in life is problem solving. I think if you are a person with a disability, I always say that we are by default problem solvers, because we have to problem solve all the time, because the environment isn't designed for us. How am I going to read my mail? How am I going to pay my bills? How do I find what I want in the grocery store? All of these day-to-day things that most people who don't have a disability can just kind of float through life. I don't say float through life easy, but move through their day without any barriers, don't think anything of it, because the environment was designed for them. And I think for us, if we have an impairment, we're always like, okay, so if I go to this store, what are my challenges if I go here, and that's still true today. That's just life. It is what it is. And I think that still applies to my racing and running life as well. It was, okay, if I'm going to this stadium or this track, how am I going to prepare? What do I need to know? Can I get there ahead of time? Can I scope it out? Can I just get into the stadium? Is there a large landmark I can key off of? All of those kinds of problem solving strategies I would try to use.
Right. No, those are great strategies. And, like you did say, you kind of come in, already knowing, what to look out for, what not to look out for, how are you going to, perform your best on the track. And, it's kind of, you kind of probably, since your diagnosis and what you've learned is you do everything like unconsciously. So you don't probably even think about it, even though, like you said, people who have disabilities have to maneuver, obviously including myself, around different barriers.
We have first, it's different for everybody, but for those of us who had a disability for the majority of our lives or our entire life or the most of our lives, we've had a lot of years to adapt, and we've had a lot of years to problem solve and figure things out and find different ways of doing things. And so I think for some people who may be interested to learn, like maybe learn about disability or learn what it might be like, I always caution people about simulation exercises, because if you were to give somebody if I was to have somebody else have my vision for 30 minutes and then say, okay, go about your day, they would be probably terrified, you know? And I don't want them to be terrified. I don't want them to learn. I don't want the simulation to be fear or pity, because the reason that they would feel terrified is that because they have developed into their adult life with all of their, with full vision and, a full mobility skills. So remember that it kind of shapes us, and they haven't had the decades of experience that I've had or the time to adapt. And that's what I think is important for people to understand about any disability, is that the immediate, and especially and I'm going to maybe overgeneralize a bit, but with vision impairment and blindness, a lot of people assume that it's closing your eyes or turning off the lights or being in the dark or being blindfolded. I don't think that that's the right simulation. That's not what it is, because if you thrust yourself into that situation and you're a visual person, your immediate experience is not going to be the same as mine or someone else, because I've had 45 years to figure this out. And I've learned a lot of skills and ways to compensate and adapt. And that is significant. And so I think that, I don't know if I'm explaining it well, but I always tell people, let's just be careful about simulation, because it doesn't give that person the true experience. It might be scary, and we don't want them to think of disability and be scared.
Right. No, for sure. I totally agree with you. So when competing, was there any moments that were the most challenging, again, whether it was training or some type of race?
Challenging in what way? Like challenging, just challenging of the sport itself, or challenging really in relation to my vision?
Really in terms of challenging in terms of your vision.
That's a really hard question to answer for two reasons. One, because I don't know how my experience differs from my competitors who can see. I mean, I clearly know that they can see the clocks, and I know that they can recognize people better than I can. So it's hard for me to say, like, how much different is it? I don't know. I don't have that perspective. And the other reason I hesitate on that question is because if I were to tell a story or a moment where I was challenged, it might come off or be thought of as I'm making an excuse. So I start off by saying, which I've never done. I start off by saying this, is that I don't believe I would have run any faster if I had perfect vision. Because even with that little, my sliver of peripheral vision that I relied upon in knowing how hard I trained and knowing how essentially fearless I was, there was never any hesitancy in how I raced or competed or trained. I don't think that my vision impairment was anything slowed me down, literally or figuratively. So I always say, like, if if you had it, and I don't want to say this, but if like there was some sort of magical, treatment that were to suddenly grant me back my full vision, it's not like when I was training and racing, it's not like I think my performances would have been any different. I mean, it would have been more, it would have been nice to see a clock, but seeing a clock doesn't mean I wouldn't run any faster. You know what I mean?
Right.
So I start the answer off with that explanation, but I will say, and I don't want this to sound the wrong way, so I have to be careful. When I ran in the Olympic Games, so I'll start off by saying most of the tracks and stadiums that I ran on in the United States, there's bleachers on the back stretch, and there's bleachers or stands on the home stretch, and there's usually some kind of large jumbo, display where they have, they put the results and so forth on one end or the other. But it's not like a fishbowl, right? It's not like, there's usually enough differentiating landmarks on the perimeter of the stadium and of the track for me to be oriented. So I know, am I on the back or the home stretch? I know because of how all of the things that are happening in the periphery of the track. So I never had any trouble when I would race in the United States, including at the national championships and including in the Olympic trials. I never got disoriented. I never and I don't mean to make a pun out of it, but I didn't lose track of where I was on the track. I didn't lose my orientation. I knew where I was, simply because of that familiarity with the stadium and familiarity with kind of keying off those the larger landmarks of the stadium. So all that being said, when I got to the Olympics Games in Sydney, we're not allowed in the stadium until the minute you race. So you don't actually go into that stadium until literally minutes before the gun goes off for your race. So there's no prep. We talked about that. There's no, let me walk a lap and kind of get my bearings and figure out where I am. There's none of that. It's just that's not available. So when we got into the track in Sydney, and it was the evening races, so it's a huge stadium. I think it was 80,000 or something people. And there were these lights that really shine down on the track. So if I kind of look up a bit, all I see is light, just tons and tons, like a floodlight. So there was nothing to key off of in my upper visual field at all. And then my peripheral field, it was basically a wall that went all the way around the track that was a decent height wall to separate the track from the stadium. So I got disoriented really fast because if I was on the back stretch or the home stretch, I got in the middle of the race, I didn't know where I was. I knew I was on the track, and I certainly wasn't going to run into another athlete. But when you're racing and you're jostling for position, and you're pretty much all, 100% of your energy and effort is put into performing. At the same time, I have to put energy into figuring out where I am. So, and ironically, and it had never happened before, so it kind of caught me off guard in the evening races, which was the semifinal, especially, which is the race before I got to the final. I actually got confused, and I thought I had 600 meters. I thought I was on one side of the track when I was really on the other. And so as I was approaching the end of the straightaway, I thought I had 600 meters to go, which is a lap and a half. And I was really approaching the bell lap, which means you have a lap to go. So gauging your pace and how to run a race, especially one like the 1500, which is very, very fast, you have to know where you are to gauge that correctly. So it was kind of like, oh my gosh, I have a lap to go. I thought, and so then I just took off and I was putting down my final kick, and I made it through and I qualified and I made it to the final. But I'd never encountered that before. And so after the race was over and I knew I made it to the final, and I remember talking to Matt, who's now my husband, I was like, we're going to have to come up with a strategy because I have to do this again. I have to do this again in 2 more days. And and it's an evening race and I don't know where I am on the track. So, yeah, so it was very strange. And the other piece I think that disoriented me in Sydney and at the Olympics was that, so athletes in the big stadiums, you're kept in a call room underneath the stadium, underneath all the stands. It's kind of like a dark hallway and then a room, and there's usually like a small little straightaway of artificial tracks so you can do strides or whatever. And then they bring you out, and most tracks that I've ever been on in a stadium like that, when they bring you onto the track, they're bringing you onto the track where the 100 meters would start. So they're bringing you into the track where if you were facing forward, you're facing the final straightaway and the finish line is in front of you. Mm-hmm. But in Sydney, they brought us in at the start of the 1500 meter mark, which is on the other side of the track. So they brought us in literally on the backstretch. And so when I entered the track, I remember when they walked us out to the track in Sydney, I started to make the 200 meter walk over to the other side, and the officials called me back. Like, no, this is where you start. And I'm like, what? We start here? So I was completely turned around. I got really turned around, and part of that was the combination of how we were brought into the stadium, the lights of the stadium, not really being able to see, above those lights, and then plus having no landmark other than just this wall that was the same. It was a fishbowl, and it was very challenging.
Wow, but you did it, so that's all that matters.
I guess so.
And you made it through what you know and what you've experienced with your Stargardt's disease through the years. What would you have told your younger self 20, 30 years ago, based on what you know now?
Oh my gosh, that's such a good question. My younger self in the earlier days, I would have told her not to make life more difficult than it already is. I had a tendency, especially in high school, of not being willing to accept accommodations or use aids to help me with academics. I wanted to do everything the way that my fully sighted peers did. And I figured that doing something in a different way meant that I was cheating. You're not gonna believe this, but it meant that I was cheating. Like, for example, just being able to listen to, when I had a literature class, being able to listen to those novels on audio. Back then it was called books on tape. I can't say that now because no one knows what a cassette tape is, except for me because I'm old. But I resisted those types of accommodations because I felt like that would set me apart from my peers. It would mean that it would delegitimize my grade. And I was so stubborn and believe that I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. I'm going to be like everybody else. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. And I made my life so difficult. I made my life so difficult. Maybe it's the lesson I had to learn. And I think there did come a day or a turning point, and it was probably during college, where it was like, Marla, this isn't going to work. You got to do things differently. It's just the way it is. And so I think the process of acceptance and accepting, I don't know if it's accepting the disability as much as it was accepting the fact that I had to do things in a different way, took a long time and didn't happen all at once. It took years, and even into my adult life, I kind of approached everything from a position that I could do anything as long as I was willing to work hard enough. So I had a belief, that was sort of my underlying principle of how I operated, was that if I was willing to do the work, and I was willing to figure it out, I could do anything. And so I kind of approached everything in that way. If I was willing to walk up and down a grocery store, every single aisle with a magnifying glass and pick up every single object to figure out what it was, then I could do my grocery shopping. Right. Now, that's not efficient, that is not practical, and it is not how you want to spend your day or your life. But it became, and it took me a while to learn that, but that was my original approach, was that stubbornness. So back to your question, I would have said, you know what, life is too short and there are more important challenges ahead. So don't worry about the little things, you know, take advantage of the visual aids or assistance from others, which was another really hard thing for me to do. I really did not want to ask anyone to help me. To get through the day-to-day stuff, because that's just day-to-day stuff. And there are more important things to really put your energy into, you know, and that would have been advice I would have told myself. And the second thing I would have told myself is that, and I didn't, as I got back to your first question, is I had no idea the potential I had as an athlete. And so I kind of felt like sports was secondary to a career like in academics, and I also, and so it would have been, I think, helpful. I would have probably had a longer career or started earlier in the sport if I had known that was something I was going to be doing as an adult, and something I would be, you know, was going to have that level of potential. So I guess those would be the two things.
Those are great two things. Well, as you've grown from being a child and adolescent, and into your adult years, how have you seen inclusion and accessibility change?
I mean, I can only speak, this is a big question, and I think you could get a lot of different answers from a lot of different people, because I only have my own experience here to lean back on or to refer to. But, you know, from my experience and where accessibility has evolved for the better is in assistive technology, and I don't want to say just technology in general. So when I was in college, so I was in college from 1980, I can't even remember, 1987 was my freshman year, and then I got a master's through 90. So I was in college from 87 to 94. There was no internet, there were no laptops, there's no iPhones, you know, everything was in a book, everything was printed. You had to go get a syllabus from your professor, which was a big, thick packet of printed material. You had to go to the bookstore and get your textbooks, which are all printed. I can't see print. I can't see print. And so you have to remember, it was print heavy workload in those days, still is, but it was all hard copy print. And so I had to hire readers to read a lot of my content into cassette tape. Again, most people don't know what that is, but cassette tapes were prior to digital audio tracks and so forth. And then I would listen to, so it was like my academic career was a two-step process. It was, how do I make the content of what I'm supposed to learn accessible to me? That's step one. And that in itself is going to take me a great amount of time and problem solving. And then step two is, okay, now I get to do the work, right? Right. So any other student who can see doesn't have a step one. Mm-hmm. They're just walking in from whatever, you know, it was San Diego, and there was a lot of, you know, coming in from some college frat party or whatever. Don't mean to stereotype here, but, you know, come into class and the information is just bam, available to them. All they have to do is look up, you know, and I would be like, actually, I had to go get the content for this class and the textbook and hire a reader and have it read aloud to me and then put on tape. And then I had to do like 20 different things just to make that available to me. So the changes now, because you have to remember now everything is digital. And so, anything that you can take an online class. Not to say that all online classes are accessible. We can talk about that in a minute, but like the content, generally speaking, textbooks. I don't know if you're familiar with Bookshare, but that's been an amazing service. I can download a book on my iPhone now, and I have an app that can read it to me, and it's a service for people with print disabilities. And textbooks now, it depends on the version of the textbook in college, but there's different ways to digitize it, to make it, you can have textbooks converted into even a Word file or a text file, and then use screen readers to have it read to you. So you're not relying on people to read to you. So where I see the greatest advancements in terms of my own independence and access has been in the area of technology. I can't tell you, like, think about like a daily errand would have been in the old days, go to the bank to make a deposit, right? But when you go to the bank to make a deposit, you have to fill out a deposit slip, which I can't see. So I would have to go to the bank. First, I have to get to the bank, right? Which is a bus or whatever. And then get in the bank. And then I have to go find the line. And then I have to explain to a teller that I'm visually impaired and I can't fill it, because they always say, well, you need to fill this out. I said, well, I can't see that. So could you please fill that out for me? Here's my account number. So I'd have to ask for help. This is just a deposited check. You know, this is like grocery shopping. It's the same thing. It's like, this is not how I want to spend my life. You know, now I can actually deposit a check from my phone. You know, it's crazy. I don't even have to go to the bank. I don't have to fill out a deposit slip anymore. So when you think about, those advancements, the technology of today existed when I was in college. I may have very well chosen a completely different major, because there were other areas of study that I was really interested in, but I was too afraid because there was too much reading and I couldn't do it. So in any case, you know, that's where I see the greatest change, but it's still a work in progress. You know, it's a work in progress for all of us as a community to continue to advocate, because I keep saying sometimes what can define disability is the environment. If my environment is accessible and my digital environment is accessible, I don't feel like I have a disability. Right? I can do everything. I feel like I can do anything.
Right.
So, but then I was explaining this to my colleague at work, actually. I said, but you know what? If you take me out of this environment where I have control, where it's accessible, and you put me somewhere like an airport, I'm just going to use an airport as an example. Not that we can go to an airport right now. I am completely lost. I don't know where I am. I can't see the gate numbers. I can't read signs. I don't know which way is the exit. I can't find baggage claim. I can't find restroom. Right? So, you know, that's the reality, right? That isn't me being incompetent or inept. That's just me being in an inaccessible environment.
Right. So so actually talking about these situations where you're, you know, in an airport, or you know, you're in a restaurant, need to go to the bathroom and so forth. I mean, clearly, obviously, if your husband and daughter are there, obviously they help you, but do you use a navigation pole to help you if you're alone?
In terms of like a cane, do I use a cane or mobility?
A cane.
Yeah. So I've gone back and forth with it, but primarily I'm not a cane user because of the like, we come back to this, you know, I have that peripheral vision,
right,
which is what you use primarily in mobility. So so that's the secret. If you see me walking, you may have no idea that I can't see.
Right.
That I can't see 10 feet in front of me. But that's the thing. So it's this 1 foot in, 1 foot out of both worlds life that people with low vision like myself, I think, live in. It's like we're 1 foot in and 1 foot out. Our level of functioning is sometimes defined by how accessible or inaccessible the environment is around us, and how we appear to others is also can be defined by how accessible the environment is around us, and our adaptability and our own compensation skills and so forth. But there was a time that I did when I was in the airport where I had a cane with me to, I thought to see if it would help me, but it was not getting, it's not the wind, the feel that I have. If I have that 10 feet, I know that there's some, like, I'm probably not going to walk into someone else, not going to walk into a trash can, because that's going to land in that peripheral vision and I'm going to catch that. Where my challenges are is I can't see I don't have the distance field. I don't have the signs. I can't get my bearings, and I can't get my orientation. I can't sense of direction. Like, people with vision can look far into the distance and they know what's going on down there, right? Or they can read the signs and they can follow arrows and all that. If none of that was there, and plus you don't have the ability to look far away, I don't know. Am I going deeper into the airport? Am I going towards baggage? Where am I headed? And so I would use strategies. If I was by myself and you're getting off a plane, I would just follow everybody. And I would just hope that everybody was going to the same place I wanted to go, or going to Bachelor. I think as I've gotten older, I've been a little more realistic, and I'm visually impaired and I can't see the signs very well. Are you going to be going to baggage claim? And if so, can I follow you? I would do something like that. Another strategy, when you get to the airport, now you can do it on your phone, but you used to have to check the board of what gate you have to go to. I can't see, there's no way I can see that. So sometimes I will ask somebody, there's usually somebody's there, and I will explain, I can't, I'm visually impaired, I can't see the board. Would you be able to tell me where my gate is? And I used to be able to see gate numbers because they're really big. Mm-hmm. I can't see them anymore. So now I think if I were to fly, I have not flown in a long time, I would ask, if I could, I might ask for an airport, when you come into the airport, for someone to walk with me to the gate, just so I can make sure I'm at the right place, So it's just what it is, you just sort of figure it out.
Of course, no, we all have to figure it out. And, fortunately in this world, especially now with, more inclusion and accessibility, people are willing to help. And, I'm sure your family is very supportive of you. And, I think that's also really important because, not everyone is in the same situation as us. And I'm just giving, you and I as examples. But it seems like you know what you're doing when you're out there, we all have to be. So since you've stopped competing in the Olympic Games, what have you been up to now in terms of your work? I know that you have a master's in special education, and you're a sports equity advocate, and you do a lot of also disability advocate stuff. So can you tell us what you do?
So sure. I retired from competing in 2006. I had my daughter in 2005, so she was 1 year old when I retired. She's about to be a teenager, which is unbelievable, she's already a teenager. She's about to be 15 pretty soon, but
it's adorable.
So I do have a couple grad degrees in education. So when I retired, I went back to teaching for a number of years. I was still in Oregon at the time, and then relocated out to Boston. My husband was coaching track at university here, and I started working at Perkins School for the blind in a couple different roles. I did some teaching. I did some worked with marketing and communications, and then I also discovered sort of the world of digital accessibility and started getting involved with digital accessibility assessments and techniques to remediate sites that weren't accessible and to help like other organizations learn how to build accessible digital properties or digital assets, for example. So like how to create accessible digital documents, Word or PDF, how to build an accessible website, and so on. So it took, I got involved in that back in 2014 and did that work for a number of years, still in now bringing that work into even my current role where I am now. So today I work for the Boston Marathon, and we have a para-athlete program that I manage, which includes our world-class wheelchair athletes that are Boston Marathon wheelchair champions, as well as athletes who are blind and visually impaired, athletes who run with prosthetics. We also have an adaptive program for about 100 athletes who have other types of impairments, whether intellectual impairment or other type of mobility impairment. So I've been there 3 years. It's really been exciting. We've been able to I've been able to sort of reshape and remodel the program to be as inclusive as we can be, and recognize the athletic ability of our participants, making athleticism and athlete first the sort of the theme of the program. So that work is ongoing and very exciting. In 2020, we were hosting the Paralympic trials for our ambulatory para-athletes. Unfortunately, because of the COVID-19 pandemic, the event was initially postponed and unfortunately canceled. It's now gone virtual, but I shouldn't say canceled, it's gone virtual. But the competitive divisions won't happen in a virtual race. So we're on hold, like everyone else, and thinking about the future, because I think we are going to come out the other end of this, and looking forward to having those new competitive divisions be launched in the next Boston Marathon, which is really exciting, and something I've been working for the last 3 years. So really excited to bring athletes to Boston, recognize them, have them be front and center in our competitive division, and have the world get to know and learn more about para-athletics.
It's amazing. Great work. I can't wait to see it.
Me too.
Of course, we all do post this pandemic, and just,
yeah.
You're an inspiration to others. I think that's an understatement. What message do you have to others that have disabilities?
I think we're all very different individuals. That's number one. So my advice may be applicable to some people and not others. I don't know, but I think something that we can all maybe take from is that I think that our disability teaches us a lot about ourselves, mm-hmm. as well as about the world around us, and we can learn from that and think of the ways that our disability or impairment, those challenges, have shaped us for the better. Mm-hmm. I don't know how to separate myself and my personality today from my vision impairment, because I don't know if I would be the same person. I guess I would in some aspects of be the same, but my whole life and who I became in many ways was shaped by the experiences that I've had, and those experiences have been as a person with limited vision. So, but I'm very proud of the person that I became. I'm very proud of what I've learned through my life as someone with limited vision. I always think I think about what it's taught me. It's taught me to be stubborn. No, it's not, I don't mean that. It's taught me to be that problem solver that I talked about earlier. I have a personality where I seek challenge because I get a lot of reward when I achieve something or when I'm able to figure something out. I like those challenges, and my vision probably taught me that. And it also taught me about, I think, about compassion, understanding, and recognizing how different we all are, that we all don't experience the world in the same way. I think a disability can teach us that as well. And that opens the door and opens our minds to learn from each other, and opens up us to a different way of living and thinking, and being more inclusive. There's always something to learn from others. There's always something to be learned. And so I feel like that's where we can collectively bring together our strengths as individuals who've I don't like to say overcome, because sometimes it's not the right word, but who've lived with and excelled with an impairment most of our lives. And we can share that information just as we're doing on your platform. And that in turn makes us all better for it. So I don't know, it's a long, but
it was a great
that's
answer.
What I got. I think my second answer
to some of these questions, I just like to get everybody's time. A lot of my audience loves to hear different.
Yeah, I will share one other little, and I promise I won't make it too long, but I think something that I've had to learn is that I can't assume that anybody in the world that I encounter is gonna be able to know that I have a vision impairment in my, like, I think that I think it's important to have a level of forgiveness for others. Like, don't blame people for what they don't know. How could they know? And think of when we interact with the world around us, with people in the world around us who are new to disability or new to impairment, to a vision impairment or blindness. Think of that as, try not to be angry or that they don't understand you, or that they're not accommodating you right off the bat or helping you. Rather think of it as, this is an opportunity. I feel like I have an obligation, and I think of it as an opportunity where I can now teach this individual or inform this individual of something that they may not know before. And I think that that's important, because if we present ourselves to the world as angry or resentful, then that becomes how we are stereotyped. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that's and we all get angry. We all get angry for all different sorts of reasons. But that's an unfortunate stereotype that I don't think is accurate. And so we have to, and again, speaking from many, many years of experience and not always doing it right and learning the right way, that we can have more impact in the world, in making the world better and a better place, if we think about how we can lead the way and be the educators. And that might take some forgiveness and in the process.
Great.
I don't know if that made any sense at all.
No, it definitely did, for sure. So our last question is, what resources are you engaged in that support Stargardt's disease that some of our community members may be interested in knowing about?
I would say if I've done maybe like a speaking appearance for an organization, I'm usually on the adaptability side, the living with vision loss side of things. Not to say that I'm not fully supportive of the research and the medical side, because I'm certainly supportive of that. It just so happens that as an educator, much of my focus is working with young people who are living with a vision impairment or blindness, right? So that's just been where my focus has been. And I know you've had other guests that, who are work very closely with like Foundation Fighting Blindness in the research side of things and finding cures. And that's great. That just hasn't been where my focus has fallen simply because I've been in education, and I've been more focused on supporting students to be successful in the classroom. But I think there's been, throughout my kind of when I did some speaking events, or like I said, I've been an educator in a lot of different environments in public and private institutions. And I've spoken at teaching conferences before, nonprofits that service both young and older adults living with vision loss. So I'm done events such as that to support their efforts as best I can. I think community support is very important, especially, it's important for everybody because we all need each other, I believe, as a community in so many ways. But I think for older adults especially, we talk about that adaptability. And I always say, I've had 45 years to figure this out. And I'm still figuring it out. But if you're someone in your 60s, and you're just now experiencing a vision impairment, that's life altering and could be devastating, right? And so that's where that community really comes in to supporting the individuals experiencing vision loss for the first time. Because as we know, vision loss is very prevalent in the older community, and those services are very important. So that said, I think that's where I can and have been involved. For me, I think my community was the Paralympics. I know that sounds a little bit strange, but in most cases, not all cases, we all have different experiences growing up. But I was often the only one. The only one sitting in high school English who can't see, the only one in high school algebra, the only one on the track team, the only one. And I always felt like I'm just different. I'm like, here, I'm this athlete, I'm running, but I can't see. And now I got to get my book on tape. And, it's like, I'm just figuring life out. And I felt like I was always doing that alone, just sort of figuring it out. And then I went to the Paralympics in 1992, not only meeting my American teammates, which was phenomenal, because I was like, wow, like I get to talk to somebody now. Like, well, does this ever happen to you? And what do you do? And not only was I talking to other women my own age, I was talking to athletes. So it was like, wow, this is like, our similarities and ability to connect at that level I'd never had that before. And that was a sense of community for me that was so important, especially at that time in my life. So I think it's really important that we find ways. I think we all need that connection with each other. And when we find someone or meet someone who has had a similar experience, that's where that connection comes from. And we can share information, and we just don't feel alone. We don't feel alone. And so it's so powerful, I think.
I'm totally with you. I agree. Well, this was so wonderful. Thank you so much, Marla, for doing this.